Chapter 4, Rashi and the Talmud, Intertextual Dialogue, Rashi and the Talmud, Intertextual Dialogue. To apprehend Rashi's exegetical genius, scholars must view it within the living conversation that the Talmud represents. The Talmud is not merely a repository of legal rulings. It is an active interpretive community that furnishes a network of arguments, analogies, and verbal habits that continually shape how biblical verses are read and applied. Rashi's glosses repeatedly enter this ongoing dialogue, drawing on Talmudic reasoning to ground the plain sense in a broader scholarly and communal context. In this sense, Rashi's method can be understood as a disciplined form of intertextual dialogue, where the biblical text and the Talmudic corpus illuminate one another and together govern how meaning is constructed for a learning community. Britannica, NAD, World History Encyclopedia, 2020. This chapter traces how the intertextual dialogue operates in practice, what counts as a legitimate Talmudic touchstone for Rashi, and how independent readers today can study this dialogue as a methodological model for textual interpretation. Intertextual dialogue, how the Talmud shapes Rashi's method. The Talmud functions in Rashi's work as a reservoir of interpretive possibilities, a dynamic repository of legal reasoning, ethical themes, and narrative associations that can be invoked to clarify or extend the biblical text. Rashi's method does not substitute the Talmud for the Peshat. Rather, it treats Talmudic discussion as a resource that can illuminate the verse's grammar, semantic range, or thematic horizon. In many instances, Rashi cites a specific Gemara or a rule of rabbinic exegesis to demonstrate that a particular word or phrase has implications beyond the most immediate sense. The result is an intertextual pattern in which Rashi's plain sense is anchored in linguistic analysis, while the darash that follows is informed by the wider interpretive traditions preserved in the Talmud. This pattern helps explain why Rashi's readings feel both textually anchored and pastorally resonant, capable of guiding prayer, practice, and ethical reflection across generations. Mechanics of citing the Talmud in Rashi's engagement with the Talmud is methodically disciplined. When the biblical text presents a linguistic puzzle or a legal holistic ambiguity, he turns to the Gemara to identify a principle, a precedent, or a lexical elaboration that can be productively mobilized in service of the Peshat. This practice demonstrates a careful selection mechanism. Not every Talmudic discussion is imported into the commentary, but those that reliably illuminate the verse's grammar or its immediate ethical or ritual implications are chosen as supportive or clarifying frames. The effect is to embed the verse within a recognizable hermeneutic procedure that students can learn, replicate, and test against additional textual material. The cross-reference habit, linking a phrase in the Bible to a Bavli or Yerushal discussion, also shows how authority is negotiated within a tradition that values both linguistic exactitude and interpretive flexibility. Case studies, representative trajectories through a verse. In practice, a single verse may begin with a precise grammatical reading, and when a reading encounters an interpretive fork, Rashi looks to a corresponding Talmudic discussion to close the gap. If the Gemara offers a ruling, a principle, or a story that addresses the verse's thematic concern, whether legal, ethical, or liturgical, the dirash that follows is tethered to that diasporic conversation and directed toward communal applicability. The result is a layered interpretation where the Peshat establishes linguistic fidelity and the dirash, grounded in Talmudic argumentation, supplies a disciplined extension that the community can recognize as relevant to conduct, prayer, or ritual practice. This trajectory, grammar first, then a Talmudically informed extension, exemplifies the practical adaptability of Rashi's method and clarifies why his comments circulated as reliable interpretive tools across diverse medieval and later learning environments. Ethical, legal, and liturgical dimensions of intertextual dialogue. Beyond its textual mechanics, the intertextual dialogue with the Talmud situates Rashi's readings within a broader ethical and communal project. The Talmudic material that informs a dirash often carries normative implications, guidance about how to observe a mitzvah, how to resolve a disagreement in ritual practice, or how to interpret a narrative in light of ethical obligations. Rashi's use of these discussions thus makes the verse legible within a living tradition of decision-making and communal memory. The dirash, when anchored in the Talmud, is not arbitrary. It inherits the authority of the argument's analytic structure and is subjected to the same standards of linguistic fidelity and contextual relevance that govern the peshat. This intertextual discipline helps explain the enduring clarity and pedagogical utility of Rashi's exegesis, as it ties the verse to a credible line of rabbinic reasoning without sacrificing linguistic precision. Implications for independent learners? For readers studying independently, the intertextual dialogue with the Talmud offers concrete methodological steps that are transferable to any rigorous textual discipline. Begin with a close reading of the biblical text to establish the peshat, focusing on grammar, morphology, and syntax. Next, survey the Talmudic chorus that bears on the verse. Identify a relevant Gemara, a principle of interpretation, or a narrative tie that can illuminate the verse's ethical or legal dimension. Assess whether the proposed dirash aligns with the linguistic evidence and with the broader narrative arc of the canon. Finally, compare the Rashi-facing dirash with other rabbinic or scholarly commentaries to test its coherence and applicability. This sequence, text, Talmud, thematic extension, cross-comparison, fosters methodological rigor, reproducibility, and an evidence-based approach to interpretation that generalizes beyond biblical studies to any field that values intertextual reasoning. Looking forward, expanding the intertextual dialogue across the canon. As the study proceeds, the intertextual dialogue with the Talmud will be illuminated not only in isolated verses, but also across broader textual clusters. How a Talmudic discussion about a biblical law resonates across multiple books, how narrative connections emerge through rabbinic storytelling, and how the interpretive strategies observed in Rashi foreshadow later medieval and modern exegetical practices. This cross-textual perspective reinforces the book's overarching aim to show how interpretation is a continuous dialogue among texts, traditions, and communities. The Provençal and European context discussed in earlier chapters provide situational depth for understanding how this intertextual dialogue traveled, adapted, and persisted as a model for scholarly inquiry. Ultimately, the intertextual dialogue between Rashi and the Talmud embodies a central scholarly aspiration of this book: to teach readers to read with linguistic precision while engaging in a responsible, historically grounded interpretive conversation. The chapter that follows will extend these methods to a sequence of canonical episodes, inviting readers to practice the interactively layered reading that has sustained rabbinic scholarship for centuries. Key takeaways for transferable knowledge and skills. In examining Rashi's intertextual dialogue with the Talmud, readers should be able to articulate and apply the following insights in independent study. The Talmud as an interpretive partner that grounds and extends the biblical text through disciplined reasoning. World History Encyclopedia 2020. The mechanism by which Rashi anchors peshat in linguistic evidence while using dirash to open ethically and liturgically relevant extensions. How to identify legitimate Talmudic touchstones that illuminate grammar, syntax, or semantic range without overstepping textual evidence. A reproducible workflow for independent study. Text, cross-textual sourcing, comparative analysis, and reflective critique. World History Encyclopedia 2020. The broader implication Intertextual dialogue within a sacred corpus can model rigorous, historically informed interpretation applicable to other scholarly fields. D